Success isn't always what you expect. Togonashi Togiari, through great effort, molded themselves into a unified and increasingly tight-knit group, marshaled their talent, and put in the hours to create a showstopper of a song with deeply meaningful lyrics, and they unveiled it with a charismatic performance to an appreciative audience. In so doing, they leave their mark on the festival and earn themselves the next big step, signing with Miura's talent agency. They have gone pro, and as soon as they've done that, everything that follows is different than what they've been doing to reach this point. I'd said much earlier that the series seemed like it might work as a coming-of-age story for Nina, at least. Through that lens, this episode represents the first steps after one has grown up, and it's the one of the 5 layers of a certain thematic tension in this episode that I'm going to point out. The first third or so of Girls Band Cry's 12th episode is a great transitional set piece, featuring a set of novel experiences alongside farewells. The graduation-like last day at the Beef Bowl place, where they are customer and server for a final time, is one of those bittersweet threshold moments that make a life change really feel tangible. There's time to sit with the experience and be wistful, even mournful that something familiar will soon depart one's life. I applaud this inclusion, because that restaurant is really meaningful to all 5 of them, and giving it a last hurrah feels like paying its due. While at the same time, it's an important part of how the story even got started, as Momoko brings up treating Nina here way back when she was a stranger to the whole city. Her impulsive decision to look out for Nina for one night has led to this moment, the 5 of them turning pro together, and that means leaving some things behind, just as coming of age means leaving childhood behind. Luckily, novelty is quite the antidote to this kind of sorrow, and so both sides of the Beef Bowl graduation, we see the girls experience or learn new things. There's the photo shoot in their stage outfits from the festival, where Nina and Tomo are incredibly stiff and Momoko only a little better, though count on the rhythm section to be naturals. In fairness, Rupa has already starred in 1,000 Polaroids, and Subaru is used to being on stage, so not a shock. Still, a professional shoot is something fresh and different. So is the contract, and the meeting in a conference room that belongs to the business world, a departure from all the music industry and working class settings the girls have spent their time in so far. And 2, one of the things the contracts provides: money. Nina, at least, is pretty boiled over by that revelation, and almost immediately starts eyeing the price tag on a certain guitar. Then there's the professional recording studio, which wows with its slick presentation and small army of engineers. Oh, brave new world that has such people in it. In aggregate, these changes are dizzying, but exciting. Yet, within each, there's a little detail here and there that may be cause to cool that enthusiasm. The pictures from the shoot have been retouched. That's very standard, but a shock to Nina. And though she doesn't actually cry foul, it's an example of a little dishonesty, and even a hint of that is usually enough to make her uncomfortable. It's also a reminder that they are now in the business of selling an image, that there's a certain public perception that the agency will work to make a reality. In the contract meeting, Nina discovers the water bottle with the agency branding, the CEO's idea, and ponders having their own brand adorn them instead. Indeed, the idea of thornless thorn water does make one's throat feel scratchy. There is an implied incompatibility between their band and certain promotional strategies, or maybe this agency's strategies, or maybe just promotion at all. The money from the contract is nice, but it also comes with obligations and expectations. The agency takes a risk investing and promoting them, and takes a cut of everything as compensation, and everyone's happy so long as they actually succeed. And it's hard to ignore that reality in the shiny pro studio with other people working alongside them to create a new song. The space, the equipment, the labor, all of it is an expense, and the only thing that pays that bill is creating some music that can find a sizable audience. And we might think that writing this new song would be a repeat of a process they've already gone through many times, and successfully. But writing for their group while in pursuit of going pro is actually different. In that stage, all successes help you, while failures you simply cast aside. The only things that were invested and lost were the time and money that your group could spare. And of course, amateurs are still learning their craft. When you're a professional, failures actually hurt. Not only are more people and money involved, the expectations are much higher, the judgment much harsher for falling short. This difference between what pro bands and amateur bands face is the second layer of that thematic tension, and we can see how it mirrors the first. When we're children, we imagine being grown up. We look forward to the freedom, the autonomy, to doing the things we've watched other adults do. Once arriving in adulthood, though, what awaits us is work and bills and the stress of being responsible for ourselves, an environment with higher stakes and far less tolerance for errors. There's a brief scene at the beginning of their celebratory hot pot party where Nina is surprised that raw pumpkins are hard to slice, and it reminds Momoko of when she used to accuse her of being a rich girl. And though Nina protests for a moment, she realizes Momoko might have had a point. She did indeed need a lot of help when she arrived in not quite Tokyo, says she was shocked that she couldn't do anything. Momoko asks her if she's better now, though, and she says she is. Nina has joined the adult world in a literal sense to mirror the way the band has now joined the grown-up music world. And that simply comes with some surprising realities and a whole lot of pressure. And pressure is just what Momoko is under as they begin their new professional life writing the first song. This isn't a passion project, it's work. It's their job, and a situation that Momoko has already faced to her sorrow. Her inspiration comes from their party, a title that we don't learn but is immediately meaningful to the rest. She wants this first piece to be about them, to be their song. It's a romantic idea, but that only increases the pressure to do it justice. It's also a notion hatched with no thought for its commercial potential. Talking about themselves may not be the most relatable kind of single. Thus, the song itself is the third layer of thematic tension. Momoko is struggling and suffering and scared, because some part of her suspects that the song she wants to write will not be the one that audiences want to hear, and she thus fears losing everything all over again in this disconnect. That desire to make it about them, something true to themselves, gives the song a symbolic element. As they try different arrangements or talk about trendy things like key changes, the song changes form. As Nina says, it seems like Momoko is drifting further away from where they started. That matches her experience in Diamond Dust, that the band's changes for mainstream appeal moved them further from the original image they had of themselves until it became too different for her to want to continue. But because she felt such a sense of loss after leaving, it carried so much guilt and regret, she's uncertain about the wisdom of such a principled mindset this time around. She accepts the past judgment that her songs don't work at a professional level and is seemingly willing to alter her approach. But when this work is supposed to represent Togonashi Togiari specifically, then these desires are at cross purposes. Are they a band that will morph themselves into what is required to succeed? If so, then do the same with the song. But if they're not, then let it be what it's supposed to be and worry about its commercial viability later. This first piece is symbolically standing in for the band itself, and its internal conflicts reflect the band's internal conflict, which is the fourth layer of thematic tension and represented by the challenge from A Diamond Dust. We're going to take a little diversion now and talk about this challenge, this atypical battle of the bands, because it seems like the final showdown for the final episode, and I want to explore the idea while we can. The others have to spell the situation out for Nina, that the battle is won or lost before they even take the stage. The winner could even turn in a far worse concert and still claim victory, because it's all about the attendance, and therefore only their relative fame and popularity at this exact point in time actually matters. It's a fixed race, and it's obvious to everyone. Even Nina is convinced it's unfair once she finally understands. So, if that's the case, why did anyone on the Die Dust side of things expect them to agree to it? They would have needed to reserve the venue for those dates to offer the challenge, and get the TV show that will use the winner's song on board with the plan as well, so this is not an idle whim. But with things so stacked in their favor, shouldn't they consider this a likely waste of time, assuming that Toge Toge would just reject this lopsided proposal? And yet ultimately they do accept. So who exactly over there believed they understood our girls well enough to count on them agreeing despite such a disadvantage? Side by side with that mystery is the one they wrestle with themselves, the motivation behind proposing such a contest. Miura lays out possible outcomes. Having the increasingly popular Diamond Dust agree to a challenge with a debut band would vastly raise that band's profile. This is similar to something I talked about in episode 11, that Diamond Dust issuing their pinky salute in front of their own crowd is legitimizing the rivalry. No one knows about it except the two bands. It doesn't hurt the bigger fish to ignore the upstart, and so that act seems like it could only help Togonashi Togiari. This is that same situation writ large. So, is Dust motivated by charity? A desire to help their former bandmate get a leg up by leveraging their own popularity? But Miura suggests another outcome, that if the gap between the groups ends up being too large, there might be a very public impression that Toge Toge is unpopular, suffocating their newborn band in its cradle. If that's the goal, and the fixed-race nature of the contest is the proof, then it means someone in Diamond Dust or their agency has it out for Togonashi Togiari. The contest is a trap, but one that somebody over there expects them to fall into all the same. So, if harming them is the goal, must the idea then come from the Dust members who know Momoka, or from the one who knows Nina? They ponder this together once all understand how unfair the contest is. Subaru asks Momoka what her former bandmates might think about such terms, and she seems uncertain, maybe troubled. At this point, I don't think she wants to suspect her friends of playing dirty. It's hard for me to believe, too, remembering the three girls who were so desperate to say something to her back in episode 8, who absolved her of guilt and said they looked forward to her new band, who watched their festival performance with smiles. I can't square that behavior with believing they hatched this underhanded scheme to crush Momoka and company right out of the gate. Of course, the scheme could be the work of their agency instead, who are in competition with Golden Archer as surely as bands compete against one another. There must be something to their approach if we take Diamond Dust's rise as an example. By contrast, Subaru mentioned back when we met Miura that this agency has a few bands signed. She knew about them because they represent actors and she has classmates who hope to join. It's possible they simply aren't as savvy or experienced on the music industry side of things, and this is an attempt to trick Golden Archer instead, hoping that they'll bite on the perception of free publicity. But while Momoka is uncertain, and no one besides me is even talking about agency motivations, Nina feels pretty confident that Hina wouldn't think anything of the unfair terms, that she sees nothing wrong with getting an advantage. I imagine Nina has something specific in mind when she says that, and rather clearly thinks of Hina as an antagonistic figure. Hina is also the one that knows Nina, and Nina was the one who pushed hardest to convince the rest to accept the contest. So, is it as simple as Hina wanting to sabotage Nina's band? Is convinced that Nina's stubbornness will see them agree to the fixed race, and then propose this whole idea in the first place? In our discussions on this episode, it was even suggested that motivations could be split, that if harming Toge Toge was Hina's aim, she could keep that part to herself and pitch it to the other three as a way to help Momoka with publicity, or to help kickstart a friendly rivalry, which is something I do believe they could get behind. But there's a big assumption in there, that Nina's perception of Hina is accurate. At this point, we've got a long list of people that the girls have assumed would be opposed to them or their decisions, only to have been proven wrong in each instance. Is Hina just set to be the final example of this trend? That Nina misinterpreted her motivations in the past and declared her an enemy prematurely? These two seem to be on a collision course since the 5th episode, and for it still not to have happened probably means that something about their encounter is going to be surprising. That surprise could be that Hina is not her enemy after all. Or it could be that Hina was right. Nina really was in the wrong concerning whatever it was that went down, and Nina made an enemy out of her instead of the other way around. Or maybe something related to how Hina ended up here in the first place. Surely she knew Nina loved Diamond Dust. Is it pure coincidence or story convenience that sees Hina audition for Momoka's spot? That feels rather unsatisfying, right? Or maybe the surprise is simply how all this turns out. The new song is a flop, which the ending is at least implying, and then the contest is grossly lopsided and an embarrassment to Toge Toge and Golden Archer alike. The agency cuts their losses, and/or some members are too discouraged to continue, and this whole idealistic episode of believing and making the song they want to make and embracing any chance to play their music has turned out to be a huge mistake. They dreamed big, but a dream is all it was. They paid too little respect to reality, and reality slaps them down. Nearly every professional artist will constantly face choices between what they want to do or create and what is actually commercially viable or at least pragmatic enough for them to keep going. It's the choice of the head versus the choice of the heart, the fifth layer of this thematic tension and the one that encompasses all the others. Looking at the episode, there is an overwhelming preference for the choice of the heart. In fact, expanding that to the whole series shows a similar trend, and with comparatively little consequence so far. Nina has joined the adult world, trying to make it on her own, but she abandoned the pragmatic college plan, the choice of the head, to pursue becoming a professional musician, the choice of the heart. For Nina, how she feels or what she thinks should happen are more convincing guides to her decision-making than reasoned arguments or the experience of others. For example, after a day at the studio, they're on the train, and she expresses how fun this is, how she imagines their new song reaching others. But Tomo warns that it's not that easy, and Rupa suggests that sometimes it never reaches anyone no matter how much you want it to. This is a pretty measured take, very simple reality, and yet Nina replies not to worry. Look how hard they're working on it. It'll be fine. For her, the fact that they're putting their all into the song must surely mean it will succeed. It feels like it should work out that way. It would be only fair if it did, and so it's what Nina believes will happen. We see this repeated at each layer of this tension in the episode. For the song, Nina points out that this is supposed to be their song by Momika, so why not let it just be that? All that's important is whether or not it is their song. A nice sentiment, but would those footing the bill for the studio time agree that that's all that's important? Likewise with the Die-Dust contest layer. The sensible choice is to turn down such a rigged game. They're just starting their professional career. Other opportunities will surely arise in the future, so why take this long-shot gamble? But to Nina, it means headlining their own show and playing their own songs. She doesn't think they should ever run away from playing their music. She thinks to do so would be them losing, with seemingly little thought to the likely scenario where they lose anyway in the contest. At the shrine visit where she does convince Momika to take up the challenge, her speech is entirely the choice of the heart. They were alone in the world, but they had music. Momika's passion flows through her and brought her to all the rest. She trusts this feeling and their music, so Momika should just trust herself. She even ends by saying she wants the five of them to continue to have the same dream, and that she believes the god of rock exists. I'm not decrying the effectiveness of her speech, but all of it is emotional appeal. It's entirely things she feels or believes in, because she expects reality to conform to whatever she feels or believes strongly. This is plain in the early exchange involving ego surfing, where Nina is outraged that Diamond Dust generated so much more chatter than they did at the festival. To her, Toganashi Togiari put on a great show, and so they should be the talk of the town. Subaru points out, and I 100% agree, that of course an idol band showing some rock chops is going to be the kind of thing to generate buzz. That has a much more viral hook compared to rock band puts on a good rock show. But Nina still demands to know why not them? They were great too. Nina cannot accept it when actual events contradict what she believes should happen, and I wager that was true back during her bullying incident as well. So, you can imagine how completely unprepared she was to see the tiny view count on their new song in the episode's last seconds. Now, I don't know if this is just about giving Nina and us the impression of failure, or if we are to assume that the song really has flopped. For starters, it's like 6:15 in the morning on the day of its release. I'm not sure what kind of numbers are even reasonable at that point. Nor do we have context for possible extenuating circumstances. Perhaps a much more popular band has also released a new song and they're being crowded out. Perhaps the mention of Valentine's Day, the weekend of their contest, is a hint that it's a poor time to release something that isn't a love song, which would be another example of choosing with their hearts instead of their heads. It doesn't matter. However this actually shakes out, within this episode, the last scene appears to be a repudiation of every idealistic, uncompromising choice or input that led to this point, and there have been a lot of them. Rupa and Tomo wanted to get involved with these three because they only play what they want. Momika urged Nina to put her real feelings into her singing. Nina made shirts to proclaim their unflattering truths to the audience. Mine loves the stage because it's where she can say whatever she wants, inspiring Nina to choose to leave school. Nina held herself out as an example to Momoko that her songs really can reach people the way they are. Tomo drove off former bandmates by being uncompromising on quality. Miura sought them out and specifically does not want them to change their sound to what is perceived to work at a professional level. The other four helped push Nina to return home and face her parents with no guarantee she will return, believing it was best for her. And then within this episode, they have opted to take on the lopsided challenge with Diamond Dust, and have crafted a single that is only concerned with being their song. Thus we return to the idea of this piece symbolically representing Toganashi Togiari. Our engineer, Tanaka...
Nakata desu.
Oh, sorry. Back when Momoko handed out the temporary lyrics with the song title that the others found meaningful, our engineer, Nakata, also looked at the title, and then up at the band before him. He has indeed been watching them these few weeks, as he'll later say. He likes the song the way it finally is. It has all the things they want in it. And, crucially, he believes their song is true to themselves, so much so that he felt fulfilled working on it, but was glad to have helped them out. So if the song, which so accurately represents them, is rejected by the public, symbolically rejecting the band itself, what does that mean? Were all those choices prioritizing their ideals or their authenticity the wrong ones to make? Have the things they valued turned out to have no value? If all the times they chose to be true to themselves don't make them popular, and don't make them a success, then what good were those decisions? Maybe in the final accounting, that will be the series' big question. If they don't succeed, then was there any point? Is it really Budokan or bust? Is there anything they've gained that can't be measured in follower count, or song downloads, or ticket sales? Stepping back to look at the whole thing, obviously the answer is yes. The girls have paid a lot in angst and worry and tears to form the bonds they now have. Nina has become a version of herself she actually likes. She and Subaru have gained clarity on what they want to do with their lives, and both of them were able to communicate it to their families and improve those relationships. Tomo found more bandmates that are equal to her standards, and Momoko has continued making music rather than hanging it up, to say nothing of the relief she's gained to learn that her former bandmates hold no grudge. The episode title is The Sky Darkens Again, but these are all the silver linings on the gathering clouds. But is that enough? I don't know if they'll believe it is. The girls are not really motivated by fame or money, but the goals they do have require a certain popularity to achieve. Playing the Budokan or beating Diamond Dust will mean a certain follower count, and song downloads, and ticket sales. Are those goals more important to them, or has this guiding principle of being true to themselves, the choice of the heart, taken the actual precedence? Nina embodies these contradictory desires, for while she is the first person to suggest that they let their feelings guide them, she's also the most obsessed with their numbers, with the chatter that they generate online. Remember back when she took the joke about wearing high school uniforms seriously if it meant increasing their popularity. Part of Momoko's crisis in the middle of the series is driven by a worry over Nina, that she sees herself in her and doesn't want her to meet the same fate. Momoko at that point perceived music played just for passion as different from that played for success. She was inspired to stick by Nina after she sang a song because she loved it, not for money or recognition. There's a kind of purity and motivation that she wants Nina to preserve, as she saw the efforts to turn pro a corruption of that purity. Arguably, that same idealism is at work in this episode as they change their minds about turning down the challenge, not because they believe they can win, but because of other things that motivate them, a chance to headline their own show, to play their songs, to not run away from the challenge. And then they wrestle the song back on course, true to themselves, rather than trying to mold it into something trendy. But Nina's counter to Momoko back then is possibly the most important idea in all of this, and explains her contradictory desires. She told Momoko that what she needed to protect wasn't herself and her memories, that idealistic purity, but her desire to have her songs reach people. Nina was saved by her song. She wants others to be saved by Momoko's songs, the proof that they weren't wrong. And the kind of songs that save people aren't those chasing trends or overproduced to match mainstream appeal. They're the kind that come from a place of authenticity, from their true feelings and true selves. But to save people, they still need numbers and fame and success to spread their music wide. A song cannot reach someone if they never hear it. So these are not contradictory desires after all, they're the same desire. Success isn't a motive, but a means to an end. The contradiction lies in the approach, as writing from the heart does not guarantee a work that is widely liked, and writing for audience appeal may mean robbing a piece of its power. That is the reality of things, and one that Nina may have trouble accepting. It's possible that the girls will each need to reassess and reorder their goals. This episode is definitely an example of needing to be careful what you wish for, as fulfilling the long goal of turning pro has ushered them into an unfamiliar world. Nina is even anxious in the middle of things, wondered if this is what being a pro is going to be like, and Subaru reminds her that she chose this path. The writing of the song was the in-episode goal, which they fulfilled, but felt good about, and yet it might be a disaster. The long goal of beating a diamond dust may have led them into something of a trap as they take on the new goal of winning the contest. The reason I divide this into goals and conflicts instead of some catch-all like plot is because the audience's sense of story progression comes from witnessing a goal or conflict added, advanced, and resolved. When the girls met their goal of getting into the festival and putting on a great show, we felt a great resolution in the story's moment. When this episode opens with achieving the goal of turning pro, there's an almost tangible sense of the story's movement into something new. Adding the goal of the contest gives us a sense of anticipation, wondering about the narrative ahead. But equally important are moments when goals are reordered. Every goal a character has can't be their highest priority, and shared goals between characters may have a different ordering for each. The ending implies they may need to reassess their priorities in the final episode. Is writing their own music more important, or is beating a diamond dust? Is playing the Budokan so critical that they would go idle to achieve it? Or is preserving their current identity the more cherished ideal? If they can't make it as pros, do they still want to dream and play together? They may achieve no goals at all next episode, and it may still feel busy with this kind of story movement. In conflicts, there is the new potential trap of the contest with Didus, that a poor enough outcome might doom their band entirely. Losing on its own isn't necessarily failure because it will raise their profile. They simply can't be embarrassed. Making a good show of it possibly creates a public impression of an ongoing rivalry, to both bands' benefit. But the risk here is entirely borne by Toganashi Togiari. There is also the conflict of the failed song, assuming that that is what has happened. Not the song itself, because it's out there and done, but the reactions to it from the public and from their agency are matters that they will have to resolve, if they even can. One interesting aspect of this conflict is that there was no argument between band and agency. There was no meddling in the process, and all the girls liked the result. Miura even expects it to be a hit. Maybe everyone will feel equally blindsided. Either way, these two pressures we expect in the finale will likely influence the reassessing of goals that I also anticipate, and we may see different members reach different conclusions. Characterization-wise, I largely focused on Nina this time, as she was the consistent example of choosing with her heart in each of the 5 layers of the thematic tension, and the band's overall decision for both song and contest followed her lead. Momoko, though, is the one most conflicted, afraid of a situation in which she experienced a loss before, confused about the motivation behind her old band's challenge, and generally trying to shoulder the whole burden alone. I appreciate that Nina's consistent dislike of lies is all that is required for her to open up about her fear at the shrine. This might be the fastest they've gotten a straight answer out of Momoko yet, which I see as a mark of growth, one of those silver linings to this whole experience. Though while Nina is the one we see aghast at their song's poor start, it's Momoko's reaction that I'm really worried about, the girl who probably still suspects that her songs don't work at a professional level. The other 3 largely acted the way we expect them to at this point, though I will point out with amusement Rupa's consistent love of infighting that she brings up in the little cafe, citing the things you see in TV dramas. How shocked and disappointed she will be to hear the story that Subaru alludes to, when Momoko and Nina indeed threw drinks at one another in a restaurant, and Subaru became collateral damage in their fight. In world building, there's just a few details I want to point out that didn't already come up anywhere else. One is that Tomo has a new Budokan Here We Come picture, the selfie they took on the way to a rather fateful concert. Momoko makes her own visit, in fact, as she was absent when the other 4 did so. It feels meaningful that she goes alone, as this is during the songwriting montage when she probably increasingly felt alone as well. When they meet up at the cafe to discuss the proposed contest, Momika is also the only one that gets a different sort of drink. Interestingly too, the photo they chose for their profile puts Momika in the prominent front, suggesting that she's the critical or most prominent member. While probably true, it's another detail about the different level of pressure that she feels compared to the rest. We also see that Subaru is still in acting school despite coming clean about her future intention, and she also parts ways with the rest at the station, so I think we can assume that she didn't have to move out of her apartment like she expected. And I think all of that implies it really did go well when she spoke to her grandma. At the very end, before Nina checks their song numbers, we get to see her calendar for a moment. Going by what Miura said, it must be February 1st, and she hasn't yet flipped January over first thing in the morning. We can see a little doodle of Nina praying on the 22nd, so I wager that's when the shrine visit happened. But up in the corner where there's a mini calendar of February, she has two dates circled, the 15th and 16th. That's Valentine's weekend, and so these are the dates of the contest. It means that Diamond Dust plays on a Saturday and Toganashi Togiari on a Sunday. I thought it was odd that the smaller band was set to go second in their battle, as lots of multi-day events put the bigger bands later, both in terms of days and time slots. This seems to be the answer though. Diamond Dust will play Saturday night, which seems like a much better time than Sunday, and that stacks the deck even further in their favor. Finally, in theme. If the song really is a flop, then that consistent idea of what goes into a song and what people take out of it has a new and rather interesting addition. For this new work to be so directly labeled as true to themselves, and yet finds no interested audience, suggests that the gulf between musician and listener can be vast indeed. I also want to mention Nina's repeated attention on that particular guitar, as this seems like an expression of her stubborn resilience. Nina trying to learn an instrument has had little moments here and there since the 4th episode, where it was portrayed by Momika as a manifestation of her basking in their performance, while Nina internally imagined herself performing the same as Momika. We later learn she does have a desire to play on stage with her, and hasn't let herself be discouraged by frank appraisals of her ability. She even let herself be the butt of a joke at the festival. For her still to be thinking of buying her own reminds me of a theme from when the series started, one that may be very important in the coming episode. The main thing I talked about this time was this tension between the choice of the heart and the choice of the head, and how we could see that choice play out at so many levels. Choosing to pursue music at all, choosing to go pro, choosing how to write the song or answer the challenge. They've largely been the choice of the heart, and now they may be courting disaster. A 1-2 punch of a poor song release and a fixed race of a contest. At episode's end, their fate looks rather bleak. Their hearts have let them down. And so Nina returning to the guitar despite all the good reasons to put that aside reminded me of the premiere and its pervasive theme of defiance. Nina defied her status quo and prescribed life to come to the city at all, and encouraged Momika to defy what she saw as an inevitable conclusion to her musical career. The raised finger that became their pinky salute was originally a gesture of defiance, the same as the words still visible on Momika's guitar. As the series moved along, rock and roll itself was linked to the idea, a genre built on defiant attitudes and ideas, a rebuttal to whatever is considered proper, or mainstream, or well-advised. Rock and roll is not the choice of the head. So, as dire as things may seem, and as devastating as it will be to fall short, and I do suspect that they fall short, maybe some part of that original spirit will win out over despair. The sky may darken, but perhaps some of them will still have the heart to raise their pinkies and salute it back. I guess I'll find out when I watch it tomorrow. See you next week.